I'm Sian Honnor, editor of Bowls International, and today we are doing our first Bowls England podcast with our guest Tony Allcock, who's the current Chief Executive of Bowls England. Thank you so much, Tony. We are absolutely delighted to have you with us. Just going to have a quick chat with you about your career and your next steps. Now, your reign as Chief Executive will end in March. How are you feeling about it all?
Resigned and obviously looking forward to the future. Believe Bowls England is well placed and needs to move on, upwards and onwards, and I actually believe that that belongs to somewhere else, and a new board, a new chairman, a new chief executive ready to launch, and I'm very happy and contented.
So did you ever imagine in your playing years that you would take on such a role?
No, I was a head teacher of a special school. I had a very successful kennels business, and did I really want to take on what was a men's organisation, a little bit like the MCC with traditional values, and I could see that Bowls needed to move into a new era, and I felt that perhaps the fact that I got some street cred by being a player that had featured an awful lot on TV, that I was able to enter into the arena with some trust, and that's very, very important when you're trying to implement anything new and implement change. If somebody trusts you, it's half the battle. If you're a total stranger, then it takes a lot longer time to do.
So how did it actually come about? You were still working in the school?
No, I was successfully owned a welfare centre and a kennels, an RSPCA centre in Gloucestershire, doing some coaching, got appointments all over the world, Australia, to do coaching. So I was going to mix the two. And then there was a prospect of this job. I was actually asked to think about it in the first instance, and I applied on the very last day. And I remember being appointed in Worthing and went and sat in the car, and the first person I rang was John Bell, and said, "You never guess what I've done," and I don't think I'll repeat what he said to me.
So why did you wait till the last day? Were you not sure yourself?
Never sure. It was a big, I think probably geographically it meant that I had to move up stakes and go to Worthing, and I've loved Gloucestershire, and I've predominantly lived in Leicestershire and Gloucestershire. So that was a big consideration, and also I'd just set up a business as well. So it was a big move, and looking back, I'd done in my lifetime, I've done some things that have perhaps looked back and thought, well, I don't think I'd have done that now, but I did it. And once you make the decision, like the decision to leave Bowls England as their chief executive, once you made the decision, go forward, because you can't actually walk forward with your eyes looking backwards. Simple as that.
Do you think you were a popular choice amongst bowlers? Do you think they were as surprised as maybe John was when you rang him and told him?
I don't know whether bowlers had any real views. I certainly think I wasn't necessarily a popular choice, because I was known as a bowls player. I think people didn't know the fact that I'd been a successful administrator. I'd been a head teacher when I was in my late 20s. I was a head teacher. And I think that they just saw that I was a good bowler. So why would a good bowler make a chief executive? And that was a question. And those people that openly stated that they were surprised I was appointed actually have openly said within the first 2 years that they didn't realise that I had other skills apart from playing bowls, and I think that was that was great to hear that.
So what do you think? I mean, Bowls England was obviously formed in 2008. How would you describe how far the national governing body's come since 2008?
An enormous way. If you actually look, just pictorially about the sport and the vision, there is a long way to go, and that journey is incomplete. But the first part of the journey is complete. The mission, we're unified in name. We are a sport which serves all bowlers, in name. I think perhaps there's more work to be done in county associations where in fact we can be all embracing and encompassing, and I do feel that there are a number of areas where work is much needed, and that would have been my project had I have stayed with Bowls England, the second part of the journey. And I think it's about rebranding the sport, marketing. We do struggle as a sport in as much that we only have the one financial income stream, and that is affiliation. So our whole governance is funded by membership subscription. Unusually, other sports get government funding in all respects. Some of the aspiring nations, such as Australia and Bowls Scotland to a lesser extent, but significantly, get a huge amount of funding from Sports Scotland, for example. I understand they predominantly fund their chief executive. So therefore, you then might be able to divert affiliation fees into more development, more coaching. So I think that in essence, we have come a long way, but it's sometimes with moving a traditional sport, you have to be mindful. It can be achieved, but it will take longer perhaps than you anticipated.
What would you say have been your biggest frustrations with it? Is it the fact that obviously some things are hard to change?
I think the frustration of which is still with us is the fact that we as a sport don't know who we are. If somebody said, how many members have we? I know the number. What does that number represent? I haven't really a clue. I suspect that it has 80% of people that are over 65 or and beyond. Well, I suspect 4% of bowlers are sort of under 30.
But that's the role. You've created a role now for Jamie Chesney's come in, and that's part of that, isn't it?
I believe it is, and it's about convincing organisations and clubs that have never had to submit insight and data to a national governing body. That culture is going to take, it will take as much work as unification did with the counties, because at the end of the day there's always this idea that that I don't want people to know my age or what I like. But actually, if you sit where I've sat, you can't you can't put on the shelf in your shop what people will buy, because you don't really know what they want, and this is the issue. We think we know, and that's a huge challenge. If we're going to move this sport forward, we have got to know how we can best serve our members.
You touched upon unification. Would you say that during your reign as chief executive, that has been the hardest thing?
It was, yes, it was a challenge. It took the best part of 14 months. And it's all about holding hands, really. Even in traditional sports and traditional organisations, even with modern communication, the most receptive way, in my view and experience, is to talk to you face to face, and people get it. They sort of get it electronically, and maybe what we're doing today, in as much that this podcast is the way forward, in as much that people are hearing what I feel about the sport, and will probably enjoy listening rather than actually reading emails, because I get so many emails. I do start to scan them, obviously.
Do you see in the future a possible unification between the indoor and outdoor codes? I know it's been tried, but
yeah, that was probably one of my, not me personally, but the sport's failure. We failed by one vote to become an indoor and outdoor sport, and it was just a huge mistake. And it took around about a year and a half, and the government was so keen in those days for us to do it. They gave us a grant of £70,000 in order to do that and to activate. And sadly, there were 4 organisations, 3 were in favour, and the one organisation, it failed by one vote, which was just enough to just, we just couldn't go along with three. So I think if you look at what the government was saying and are saying, that we want to invest in older people. We want to try to get older people more active, and they have funded the Bowls Development Alliance, and they're doing some really good work. However, had this sport been unified, that would have been a department attributed to the sport and a joined up approach. So it necessarily follows that in principle, who can deny that the sport should not be unified? It should be unified. And there are ways in which you can do it. For example, equestrian have a very strong umbrella organisation, which obviously has show jumping, dressage, and all the activities. And it really means things. It means it's going places. We as a sport have Crown Green, and they're not insignificant. They have 80,000 members. We have short mat who actually don't know who their members are. There are huge amount of short mat bowlers.
It's really popular.
Huge, but we don't know who they are. So I think that together we could be a lot stronger. We could put a big case for additional funding. We could get the message out there. We can do all the things that people want us to do, all the things that we want to do in order to promote the sport. But it's sometimes very hard to find the financial means in order to do it.
It just seems from an outside point of view to make sense, because it would save a lot of resources, time, money. You've got people, the EIBA and Bowls England, doing exactly the same. But, do you think that it will come together at any point in the future?
I think it's a huge challenge in as much that principally it should happen. And then you start to look at the detail. And, as we all know, the devil is often in the detail, in as much that Bowls England is owned by 35 counties. EIBA are not necessarily owned by the clubs, but that's basically where the affiliation fee comes from in order to fund the IBA. So therefore, the IBA deal directly with clubs. Bowls England deals directly with a county association. And as it is, naturally, when there's a merger, and the same thing happened with the IBA and the EBA, the Women and the Men Association. It was about, one has finances, one hasn't, and it was a real negotiation to try to get the funds to come together. And of course the dynamics of both organisations are very different, and financed in a very different way. And I think that not only has Bowls England got to convince its 35 shareholders that it would be the best thing since sliced bread to amalgamate, the IBA has to also convince the clubs, and then we actually have to look at things like real things like affiliation fees to the world body, which is quite significant, and as much that we pay huge amount to affiliate to World Bowls.
What would you say have been the highlights during your time as Chief Executive?
The highlights, I think, has been most definitely the move from Worthing to Leamington Spa, which interestingly, very, very interestingly, came about in a very, very peculiar way. It's a bit of a long story, but I'll tell you about it. The men had a white rose trophy, which is actually 8 young bowlers that represent a county. And the EBA in those days said that we needed to embrace the whole of this the competition by bringing the youngsters to Worthing, and it happened one year. It was a magnificent day in Worthing, 4 or 5 greens full of youngsters, parents cheering and shouting. There was hooters and the noise was loud, and it was absolutely, perhaps in my view, the best 2 days that Beach House Park has ever seen. And the next year a proposition came to say it needed to go back just for the finalists to come, because it was too expensive to bring teams from Northumberland, from Durham, from Yorkshire, from anywhere to go to Worthing. Overnight accommodation, travel, the M25 and everything else. And the vote went, and it went one vote. The proposition won by one vote. And the room realised what they'd done. We were actually had obliterated in a vote one of the best 3 days we've ever seen at Beach House Park. And somebody said that we did this because it's an impractical venue. And of course, you can imagine that went down as a prick balloon, because everybody loved Worthing, irrespective of the M25 and everything else it caused. And that actually rang in my mind that if geographical location of a national championship is going to sever activities such as those wonderful 2 days, let's do something positive about it. And coincided with the two contracts in finishing in Leamington and Worthing. And Worthing, I felt, were perhaps had served their time. Great venue, dreadful to get there from all over the country, apart from the home counties, of course. And actually, on the back of that, people realised that ultimately, if travel is going to hold back the promotion of our sport, let's do something about that, and we did it.
But it'd be fair to say there was sort of uproar in some camps, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Just,
Absolutely.
The men in particular just couldn't get their heads around it, and it took a long time for them to get to a place where they even thought Leamington was okay. I mean, that must have been really difficult from your point of view, trying to do something positive as well.
It was, but Warwick District Council, the council I negotiated with, made it easier because they gave us an absolute no-brainer deal. They gave us a deal of accommodation in their council offices, a whole suite, a whole floor, which would help Bowls England towards redundancies which we might have had to make, and furthermore, it might have helped. It did actually help us through the transfer of, and we didn't have to acquire a building. And while we've lived in for grace and favour with Warwick District Council for all of these years, we've managed to be able to amass funds to do other things. So that's been a huge success.
So it did make sense from a business point of view, financial point of view, even if the bowlers were, some of them, not all of them, unhappy about it, it was the right thing to do from Bowls England point of view.
And now it's the home. And, people used to say to me when we first moved there, this isn't Worthing. But of course, I'm old enough to say this isn't Mortlake, which was the previous venue. And there's no answer.
So how did you get into bowls in the first place?
I was actually, my mother was playing a club singles on a Friday morning, heavily pregnant, and she couldn't finish it because by the afternoon she delivered me. So I suppose in that respect I was virtually almost delivered on a bowling green. And that year, in 1955, the records show that my mother won the county pairs, and that obviously was my first trophy.
Your dad played too?
My father played. My mother's an England international. My father was a regular Middleton Cup skip for Leicestershire. And interestingly, they never taught me. They never encouraged me to play. I had that thing which was called natural talent, but only actually at bowls. I am hopeless at darts, at cricket, at snooker, anything with a stick, hopeless.
Why do you think they didn't sort of encourage you to take it up?
Because ultimately, I wasn't able to join a club until I was 16, because you weren't allowed on a bowling green.
So what happened? What did you do?
I played on the side of the cricket pitch and had international matches. Well, no, because I used to have 8 bowls, and I used to play 21 ends and play all the bowls of one side and all the bowls on the other on each end. So I used to occupy myself for 3 or 4.
You say that like that's a perfectly normal thing to be doing. How old were you?
Oh, about 6.
Oh, okay. So how did you weren't able to join a club until when?
I joined a club 2 years. And then the first year that it was a village club that was struggling in those days to survive. I took my schoolmate Paul Clark, who was a good cricketer, said, "Do you want to learn how to play bowls?" I taught him, And the very first year we were 17, which was the age you can enter. The first year we could enter, we entered the Leicestershire men's county pairs and won it, and got to the quarter final at Mortlake as 17-year-olds. And then the next year I won the county singles for the first time.
So you were decent straight away.
Well, yes, yeah.
But you put a lot of practice in.
Well, I was an experienced bowler, wasn't I? I had all those matches. I played all those matches on cricket fields, you know.
So who did you aspire to be like? Was there anybody that you thought that's my aim?
No. I grew up in the Bryant era. You know, he is number one in the world. There was no one to replace him in more ways than one. But I had my own style, slightly cavalier, very strong, daring. I was never afraid, and always absolutely at my best when you just about given me my last kick.
Did your club mates like you, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I was a very nice youngster. I was kind of obnoxious. I think I knew I was good. I wouldn't tolerate sort of necessarily bad bowls. I didn't have much empathy. Anybody had a bad game.
Did you have a go at your team?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, until perhaps one day somebody came to me and sat me down and said, you know, you do realise you are a fantastic player, but if you're going to survive in teamwork, you've really got to have a bit more compassion about, you know, play. And it really hung home. And I actually feel that I know most of my successes were singles, but I also acknowledge that as a leader, as a skip, I had the talent or the characteristic and probably the leadership qualities to make a world-class skip as well, which is unusual because you sometimes get a single specialist and they can be a good skip because they're a good player, but not necessarily have that flair of getting the best out of players. For example, I remember being 14-4 up in the final of the National Fours at Worthing with a very young team. It was a young Les Gillett was number 2, and a club player was Andy Wills was leading, and another club player. We were all the same age in our 20s, and I called them into the middle of the green and gave them an absolute dressing down, because I could see that the last 2 ends were a bit sloppy. We nearly dropped to 3, we nearly dropped to 2. And that, you know, they will recall and said it's the only time that they've been 12 shots up in the middle of a national final, in the middle of the green at Worthing, and they get a rollicking.
Yeah, it's unusual. Did you win?
Yes.
Oh, that's all right. What happened? So what was the transition from playing and winning county titles at 17, 18? What happened then?
Well, in 1980, I hadn't been in... bearing in mind, for those people that might be watching, I didn't get capped for England outdoors until 1978, and I had my first trial in 1972. So I was too young. Clearly, and my very first cap for England was in 1976 as a 21-year-old, when in the last game against Scotland I was promoted to skip. So I think that ultimately, I don't know, probably the talent was recognised, and I played my first World Bowls outside in 1980 and won a gold medal with David Bryant. What
made you keep going for those 6 years? Because obviously the dream was to be playing for England. That's quite a long time to sort of keep being cast aside.
I think ultimately, if you want to do something and you want to, you know, you are passionate to do it. That's always been my style. If I'm going to do it, I will do it. And if I'm not necessarily sure about it, you won't see me for dust. And I was absolutely ambitious. I remember once going back in the back of a car with my parents from a match on a Sunday from Goodwood Bowling Club, and I said to my mum and dad, I'm going to have an England badge one day. And I must have been about 8, and there was kind of a silence, and then, you know, they moved on because they obviously didn't ever think that it would happen.
But that must have been a proud day when you got into the England team for your parents.
Yeah, I think it was. And that year my mother and I won the county singles each, so it was quite a nice time to do that. And they didn't quite see me in my heydays. My father did. My mother died before, but they were, they were obviously very proud parents, and naturally, who wouldn't be,
Was there a point that you thought to yourself, right, I've really made it?
Not really. I think to be fair, the world singles final indoor at Coatbridge, which was 9 sets, and we had a break, and I was playing David Bryant in the final, and he led me 4-1 after 5 sets, and I went back and won the next sets, and then just won whatever it was, and actually beat him. And I thought, I've actually matched David Bryant, I've actually beaten him, and I've actually become the world champion. It wasn't the first title, but it was, interestingly, it was 9 sets.
Yeah, that's a lot, isn't it? So after you were selected to play for England, what were your experiences of that, playing in the international series?
I think I was very lucky in as much that I was with, I played outdoors. I got my cap outdoors as a lead and my cap indoors 2 years before that as a skip. So I think that's an indication that perhaps I was versatile in that respect, and did play the front end for Mal Hughes originally in the outdoor team, and then after 2 years selected for the World Championship, where I played middle in the triples with David Bryant, and we became gold medalists. We won the gold medalist in 1980, and I think that ultimately that was David Bryant. I believe the combination, we were totally and utterly different, chalk and cheese. And I think that the turning point perhaps was the first indoor pairs that ever was televised was at the Bournemouth International Centre on the seafront. And the first rounds were a round robin, and then it qualified to a knockout. And I was leading for David, and we lost our opening game against 2 from Canada. And David then turned round to me and said, "Tony, I think I'll lead for you and you skip for me." And we went on to win the world title then, and then we won it another 4 or 5 times together. But then, I was David Bryant skip.
So you said you were so different. Why do you think you were so successful?
Because David was ultra cautious. If you're ever playing cards with him, we played solo. If he ever called, whatever he's going to be, you just get your money out your pocket and put it on the table, because he wouldn't have called it if he wasn't a stone waller. He was a stone waller player.
And you?
Calculated. I was cavalier. I was a little bit unpredictable. I was a very, very. I'm a Gemini, and I don't necessarily follow star signs, but there's 2 sides to me, and that's I'm very compassionate, very soft, and if I'm watching a film, I'll burst into tears, and then if I really mean it, I can deliver it. I am absolutely focused on delivering it and have a vision, and will go for it, and very strongly, and brave. And I was certainly a very brave player.
So who was in control out of you two?
I was always, but also it was a great combination. The television, if I don't know where the recordings are now, but I mean it was. David would often stop little bit like we just saw with Nicky Brett. He's got the same style that we had, but David Bryant and I, it was a comedy. It really was a comedy, in as much that I'd want to play that shot and David would want to play the safe one, and we kind of juggle it about, and it was quite fun. But I think that, definitely. I was in control, and he made me be in control by actually allowing me to demonstrate my own game, my own flair, because he obviously believed I was able to do it and was able to produce the shots. So he just thought, well, you get on with it.
Sounds like he was a perfect partner for you, really, in many ways.
He was. Yeah, he was. We shared a room for many, many years, and the fantastic story of when I woke up one morning and I thought the room was on fire, and there was David sitting in a chair smoking a pipe, and he had a set of bowls in his hands, and he had sandpaper, And I said, and then he ran these bowls up from the with twin beds from his bed to the door of the hotel room, and he said, these are bowls will do. And I said, well, excuse me, what's happening? He said, I said, what are you doing with these bowls? He said, I'm going to play with them today. I said, David, this is a semi-final of the world singles in Scotland. He said, I like the feel of these, but he said they're a bit slippy. So he said, I've got this sandpaper to actually wear them down. And
did you think he was joking?
No, because I knew what he was like, and he played with them and he won. No, I wouldn't have done that.
Don't think many people would, to be fair. Despite the pairs titles, I mean, we said earlier, many people will remember you for your singles play and your success in singles. I mean, what are the highlights for you with regards to the singles? I
think, well, I know perhaps the first world title in 1992 at Worthing in front of your own crowd was very significant. David Bryant had won the singles 2 times previous, so he'd reigned as world champion for 8 years. The World Championships were due in Worthing in 1992, and the selectors selected me for the singles berth and not David.
How did you feel about that?
Well, it was difficult.
Awkward.
I'd won the Champion of Champions 3 consecutive years, the England Champion of Champions 3 consecutive years. So I think and that took some doing if you think about it, because you have to be a champion in the previous year. And I think that the choice was a little bit controversial, if you like. The reigning champion not able to defend his title. It was a good story, because you have to be nominated by the country. And I was playing in front of my home crowd. And the very first match I played against the Will Thomas from Wales, and I lost 21-11, the opening game. And I thought the pressure being in front of your own crowd is immense. People say it's an advantage. It can be a disadvantage. It clearly was. The pressure eyes have taken the Bryant mantle over. The pressure of being in front of your own crowd. Huge crowds in those days. I was on an end rink. It was absolutely packed. And I played, quite frankly, rubbish. I never lost another game. I was something like 20 shots to, it was 25 up in those days. I was 20 shots to 15 down against Corsi, and I pulled the mat up and I never looked back, and he never scored again. And I think that was a very good victory, because the year previous he'd beat me in the final of the Commonwealth Games, almost by the same score. So Corsi was at his best in those days, and to beat Corsi, I think that probably, given the circumstances, who I was representing, because I wasn't just representing England, I was representing David Bryant, and I knew he supported me in front of my own crowd in Beach House Park, which meant a lot, and to lose the first game, and then to come, because first game in a short round robin, you're on the back foot,
Yeah, of course. Any low points of singles play?
Yeah, the lowest point, interestingly, was my very first invitation to play in the Mazda Championship in Australia. And I was playing a very well-known Australian in the final. And it was 21 up and televised. And Australia, it was great. It was 6 o'clock at night, and there was a huge following on television. And I was a young Englishman. I was a teacher. Things were hard. I'd got a Mini. It was a clapped out Mini. I was driving from Leicester to Hinckley, so it's an hour's journey each day in this clapped out Mini. And there was, in the corner of the green, elevated this brand new Mazda car, which was the prize for the championship.
So you had your eye on that.
I had my eye on this, and why shouldn't I? I was playing really, really well, and I was 20 shots, and my opponent was 18, and it came to the last end, and I held the shot, and he drew in, and it was close. It was really, really close to the measure. So there we were, waiting for the measure. They took the time. The marker measured it. They called the umpire on, and they measured it. It was forever. And I knew that, I thought I had a really good chance of being the shot. And then what actually happened is that they turned the bowl away, which of course is if you take a bowl out in this country, it means that it's the shot.
Yep.
And when I saw the umpire get hold of my bowl and roll it away, I felt ecstatic. I jumped in the air and I looked at the car in the corner, and everybody sort of was a bit dull, and I thought, oh well, okay, I am English, I've just beaten this top Australian. And then they came and said, actually, in Australia we turn away the shot.
No.
That is actually not in. So the score is now 19-20, and I lost the next two ends and lost the car.
Oh no, that's awful.
So there's the story.
And how did you pick yourself up from that?
Well, I don't know.
Never forgot that.
It was a very long plane journey home. Really was.
Do you think is there any player in the modern game that you would have liked the opportunity to take on? I mean, players like Alex Marshall now, he's regarded as the legend of bowls. Do you ever sort of look at players that are playing now and think, oh, I'd have loved to have had a go at you?
Yeah, there are a couple in particular. I think I do believe that there's a huge amount of talent there, but it's about coming together. I think I had the pleasure once of talking to Virginia Wade's coach, and she won Wimbledon one year. It was the Queen's Jubilee, so it could have been 86 or it was a long time ago, but everything came together and she won it. And the big challenge, I think the guy's name was C.M. Jones, and he was a bowls reporter as well. And the biggest challenge that they had is that Virginia Wade had so much natural talent, but she also had a bit of a blip now and again with psychological, temperament and all the things. It didn't quite marry. And he said that in that tournament, both came together and she was unstoppable and she won Wimbledon. And I do believe there are a number of players that have got immense talent. That's what you need. And the next is easy. The next is easy is about, I saw one player in particular in World Bowls this year on the TV, and I know that there is an issue, and all that was needed to be done was a few words from the bank, from the coach, and that would have changed the result. So there are still a few players around who I would like to take on board and give them the benefit of coaching, which I do believe is something that I never benefited from, and something of which players need going forward.
So leading on from that, I mean, in 2002, you were actually appointed as performance coach for the England team. How did that come about? How was that experience?
The experience was fabulous in as much that it was during that time that I actually came out and found myself. Players, we went in, into Manchester. They went to the carnival night. We were a fabulous team. Mistake that we were put into a unit where the rooms were sort of the men's team and the women's team were all together. We had a communal area that no other team had, where we all played cards and had breakfast and everything else, and the team was absolutely amazing. But it's during those championships that I had my hand on a gold medal that I was part of, that I believe is one of the best gold medals that I've ever been part of winning. And that was when I trained a visually impaired woman to play technically. And I asked her coach, I wanted to find her a coach, and it wasn't going to work. She was considerably old, Ruth was in her 70s, and she'd been married for about 40 years to this one man, and he was her life and her guide, but knew nothing about bowls. So I taught her technically, and I taught all the psychologically and tactically. I taught him. So I taught two people together, and she utilized various tactics that we only employed, and she took the mat up, which in those days for a visually impaired person was not really ever considered to be a part of the tactic, but she did it beautifully. And in fact, she won the gold medal, the Commonwealth gold medal, by winning 21-0 against Australia. So that was the biggest medal I've ever won and the most emotional.
You're an amazing coach. Like, I've been lucky enough to witness some of it, but what do you enjoy about it?
Is making others successful. because ultimately, you are part of the team. It means so much. If I'm coaching somebody and I've got an input and I'm with them, I am passionate. I'm a fierce contender, absolutely fierce competitor. And if I want someone to win, like I've been, I must be hated in some of the British Isles because I really am there to shout for England, and that's my bag. I'm sorry. I'll acknowledge that other teams play well and whatever, but I have a vision. I shout for my own, and I want my own to win.
Just going back to what you said about the time in your life around 2002, did you find coming out a hard thing to do within the bowls world?
Oh yeah, of course, and it's a lot easier now for people. The world's moved on and changed. Traditional sport as well, but there was a personality change in me at that time, and I gained so much more respect and friendship because I wasn't hiding. I think I'd often go when I was competing in world championships. I wouldn't want to stay after bowls necessarily for a drink. I go to my room, and and then it changed me completely, and it did the attitude, and it was 2002 Manchester Commonwealth Games 2002 were phenomenal for England. I think I'm right in saying it was the most successful Commonwealth Games that England's ever had in bowls, and that was attributed probably to two things. I believe that I found myself and other people found me. That was one thing, and the other thing is that we had this, quite mistakenly, we had this communal room where everybody just rolled up in their pajamas and had toast and made it, and everybody made tea for everybody else, and it was the most wonderful that we did all the team bonding and things, but this was just a magnificent thing that happened. We had this everybody was shouting for everybody else, and inevitably it was not surprising, stacks of medals.
So you played in 5 outdoor world championships and you got a medal in every discipline. You won 6 gold, 2 silver and 2 bronze, and you also played in 3 Commonwealth Games, winning a single silver in 94. What you've just described about 2002 in Manchester, how different was that from your experiences of playing in those major events?
It was very different because I'd retired. I'd retired from the sport. I retired as a world champion. I haven't played indoor bowls, competitive indoor bowls, since I became the world champion in 2002. And in that respect, I decided that I'd finished, and then the performance director's role came, and I thought, being a teacher, I can marry the two, and enjoyed it. And I really did enjoy the whole thing, and it helped me, I suppose, get over that year. Well, it was actually 2 years. It enabled me to wean off from playing, to be still involved in the game, but in a different dimension, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
Was it hard for you to sort of pick the right moment to retire from playing yourself?
No, because I was at the top. I travelled the world. I'd got other interests. It was time for a change, significantly the same as today. It's my last AGM with Bowls England that today, and I did say openly I'm not sad, because it's something that I believe is the right thing to do, not only not only for me but for Bowls England, but certainly when I gave up playing, I'd travelled the world. Bowls had owned me. I'd given my life. I'd played every night, every day, every country, planes, everything, just total and utter devotion. And I'd achieved, ultimately another gold medal, another indoor, and thought, I don't want anyone to say he was good once. The same when I was chief executive, just retiring from chief executive. Didn't want people to say, you know what, he was a really good chief executive once.
And is that why you've chosen now with regards to chief executive?
Of course.
So what would you say have been your proudest moments off the green? I'm guessing obviously 2002. What else?
I think with regards to bowls or not?
With regard to you not as a bowler, still in a bowls capacity, but you know, you've obviously been involved. I mean, you went to the Atlantic Championships, for example,
Yeah, I loved
just
that.
last year.
Just loved it. I enjoyed commentating. I commentated for Eurosport for many, many years. I was part of the Granada setup with Elton Wellesby at co-producing Super Bowl. I enjoyed, you know, I'm a bit controversial as a commentator because I just say it as it is, because that's what you need to do. And I enjoyed the engagement of that work. So that was a diversity. I think also I was able to fundraise for the World Championships for the Visually Impaired Bowls England at Worthing, and very shortly I'm selling all of the bowls that I won world titles with, and a lot of my books and a lot of some world trophies for a silent auction, which is going to happen, and that will basically be 50% to Disability Bowls England and the other 50% to two dog charities, because you know, I you know, what do I need these bowls for? Let somebody else enjoy them and enjoy the benefit. So I just hope that that's what will happen.
So will we see you in a bowls role further down the line? No.
You won't see me for DUS for at least 18 months, because I believe that it's over and out, and let things move on. And then when things have established and realign themselves and things have changed, embrace them, come back. It won't be the same. It will be different. So it's good for me to take a complete break. I'm not sure what I'll be doing.
I was going to say, what are you going to do with yourself?
Well, I don't know. There's a few things I'll do. Do things that I've never been able to do before. Certainly travel a bit and just do bits and pieces. I mean, it's been dogs, and it's been... I've shown dogs, I've judged. I still do an awful lot of judging. I've got a lot of international judging appointments. And
you're involved with the Kennel Club too?
Yeah, I'm involved with the Kennel Club. Currently the chairman, and that, you know, that's we have an enormous challenges, and particularly in that role. And that's obviously a voluntary position as well. So I'll be busy. I'll be doing something, obviously.
You were appointed an OBE last year.
Mm-hmm.
You've had the MBE previously.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea that the OBE was on the cards?
No, save that. I think there was a few external bodies that wanted to promote the fact that I'd been part of the bid for Birmingham and for Leamington Spa, so I think the Warwick District Council had a bit to do with it, to be fair. And obviously Bowls England themselves felt that the first one was purely for playing. I mean, there are other people that are titled in the sport for playing. I think the only one that I know of, certainly in England, that was actually given it for administration, that was the MBE for the women's secretary, Nancy Collins. She got the MBE for that. And I think the OBE was the application of what you did with your honour the first time round. And very, very lucky to have the Queen on both occasions. And she said two things to me, and she spoke to everyone. She asked two questions. The first one was, how many members have we? Remember that she has her own bowls club in the royal household. And I said, over 100,000, Mum. And she said, and do you still play? And I said, no, Mum, I'm too old now. And she laughed. And there's a photograph which actually will be on the yearbook of Bowls England for 2020, which is the very moment that we finished the conversation, and she and her are both laughing as she shakes my hand.
That's
so
lovely.
It was a really nice story to do that. And she certainly knew me the first time I got the MBE, because when I'm seeing you, when shall we see you playing next, was the question that was 30 years ago. So she's, you know, an amazing woman. But look, I was only one of 70, and she asked everybody a question, as she would.
Are you sad in a way that you won't be at the helm for the Commonwealth Games at Birmingham?
No. I think if I'm invited to present a medal, that would be a great honour. No, but by that time, the 2 years have passed. I may come as a spectator and have a look, because I think it would be nice to support it. But in the meantime, just take a break, let things move on, let things settle. And
do you think you'll miss it?
No, I don't actually. No, I think I've had I've been on notice for 6 months. I've had a long time to draw it all in, to prepare, and I shall miss a lot of people, a lot of friends, and things. But it's with social media, it's much easier to. Never had too many social media bowls friends, and I'm a big. I've got a huge following in Facebook from the dog, so I might open the door and let a few bowlers in now.
You might let a few slip in.
Yeah, that's right.
That'd be good of you. What do you regard as your legacy to bowls?
Legacy to bowls, I think probably in being a pioneer in the first stage of modernisation. And I say stage one because I think there's stages to follow.
And if there was one thing now that you'd like to change about bowls as a whole, what would it be?
What I'd like to change about bowls perhaps is really I'd like to have a complete revamp on the format of bowls. Because I believe that cricket had the same issue with Test cricket and one-day cricket, and we need to be mindful that we are serving people. Certainly, Bowls England are serving people that are currently in the sport, but we must certainly have one eye on those that aren't there yet, and those that are outside there. And 3-hour games of bowls and an hour and a half on a coach is not in the radar of modern ethos. It is not. And that maybe people, most successful sports are those that can hop in and hop out, and the sports that are finding the greatest challenge are those that are the ones that have to be given great commitment to. And bowls is no exception there, because if you're going to play in a championship, you've got to be available every Monday night or every Tuesday night or every Wednesday night and committed. And I think we need some more flexibility, and at games lasting an hour and 10 minutes is actually not what traditionalists want, but it's actually what we want, because those people that are outside there, that's exactly what they want. They can hop into to play a game of bowls at 6 o'clock and be home by 7:30. I might even see the kids for half an hour.
Would you say that the game has changed dramatically since you started?
Yeah, I think dramatically would be probably a strong word. But if I take a rain check and perhaps look back at when I started in 2003, and then look back to that, it has. Just take dress. However, we're not there yet.
What do you think is the best thing about the game?
The game is actually a great leveller, whether you like it or whether you don't. It is a leveller. The beauty of outdoor bowls is that people can sometimes create victory, against somebody who technically is better. And it depends where you sit. Sometimes that's not acceptable to people, and they feel that ultimately that it was just pot luck. I believe that there's a challenge in outdoor bowls. The challenge is reading the green and making it work for you. But if it's unreadable, then it becomes almost like a lottery, and sometimes that happens, and I can see the frustrations. But where it's a challenging rink and you're able to cope with that and overcome your opposition, that is the beauty of bowls, I think.
For you, indoor or outdoor?
Both, absolutely. There really is ultimately. For me, I've always been a supporter of both. I've enjoyed. There's advantages and disadvantage, and I think I can name both sides. But I've never actually preferred one or the other. I was just an outdoor bowler when I was younger because there was no indoors. There was an indoor behind a slaughterhouse in Boston, and there was an indoor with a low ceiling and several pillars in Peterborough, and there was a swimming pool in Bath that was boarded over, and that was the indoor scene when I started in the early 70s. Then it blossomed, and we moved on. But I remember the time when people finished in late September and October and started in April, and the winter was free. And now it's all the year round, and that brings a challenge, I think, to competitive bowlers too.
Yeah, and a lot of clubs are struggling to maintain membership. If you had one bit of advice for clubs that might be in that position, what would it be?
I think is that at the end of the day is try not to be too selfish and too inward looking, too insular, and try to look out the box. Think themselves as a custodian of the sport. If you love it and you really are passionate about it, try to do something of which you believe will enhance the club, the facility, embrace new people, bring them in, bring them on board, and don't try to protect your own interest, which of course is commonplace, not just in bowls, but in many other activities.
It's the change word, isn't it? Why do you think it's so difficult?
Because people like doing what they like doing. And it, I sit in the same chair at home. End of story.
But the sad thing, and you must agree, is that if we're not careful, we could easily be in a position in 20 years' time where there are just so few clubs.
Yeah, and that will happen. The consolidation must happen, because it's the challenge that face other sports as well. It's the corner shop syndrome.
So you think the answer is for the smaller clubs to pull together, because, for example, there's an area, say that there might be 3 or 4 clubs within a very sort of limited geographical area, and they're all struggling. Surely it would make sense for them to pick the best venue and come together.
But of course, it's the name of the club and the club colours that are absolutely vital for them, and they can't see outside the box. And there's been some horrendous stories of where there's been 3 bowls clubs sharing the same facility in a park with 3 greens, and the council want to go down to one pavilion type thing and 1 green, and they couldn't get together, so all 3 clubs disappeared. Self-destruction. So that's my message, is don't self-destruct. Try to think a little bit more out the box. Try to be embracing in the sport. And that's a message I believe that we need to give out, that if we're going to survive, it's not up to Bowls England. It's actually up to you people that are at the club, at club level. Because if not, you will die.
And rather than moaning about it, do something about it.
Exactly. It's in their hands.
Thank you so much. You've been amazing.
Pleasure.